Welcome to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling. You are about to discover impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you, so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Be sure you visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com. While you're there, subscribe to us via your favorite network. Now tune in, get ready, and enjoy the journey of emerging as a leader of exception in the 21st century.
Welcome, everyone, to the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast. I'm your host, Vicki Noethling, coming to you from Roswell, Georgia. The goal of this podcast is to bring topics and guests that will empower you to become that confident leader and take your business and your life to the next level. Today, I am very excited to have Andrea Johnson as my guest, and let me tell you a little bit about her. Andrea Johnson empowers executives and founders to lead with authenticity, conviction, and confidence so they can make a positive impact on their lives, organizations, and communities. As an adoptive parent who grew up internationally navigating mental and physical wellness, she learned that emotional resilience must be earned. The process of uncovering and understanding the significance of the core values became the key to the process that allows her clients to do the same. Andrea works with leaders who feel stifled and have grown unsatisfied in their current level of influence. She facilitates improved communication and corporate culture by working with teams. Her passion is equipping female leaders to define a new culture by trusting their own ability to think critically, create imaginatively, and lead effectively. Her personal journey of deconstructing her own assumptions, beliefs, and conditioning produced her signature tool, Intentional Optimism. It provides a framework for how we do what we do. It's the attitudes and mindsets we employ and embody to live out our own values, goals, and dreams with excellence. Andrea is a certified Maxwell leadership speaker, trainer, coach, and DISC behavioral analysis consultant. I thought today it would be wonderful to talk about what makes you an impactful leader. Please join me in welcoming my guest, Andrea Johnson. Hi, Andrea.
Hey there, Vicki. I am so happy to be here. And as you can see, I love words. So I toss a lot of them in there for us to stumble over all the time. And people, you would not believe how many people will say, what is international optimism? And so I think our brains see certain things. And so part of what I love to do is help people start to think critically, to see things in a different way and to challenge what we have coming into our hearts and our minds and our ears, even, to make sure that we know what we're responding to and to make sure that we know how we want to show up in those instances.
And I think, it's really something that people are discovering today is that it's one thing to think about your purpose and even know your purpose, but you have to be intentional. And you have to have optimism because this is not an easy journey or path or road that we take. And you have to be able to be resilient. And so I was anxious to have you share your thoughts with the audience today. But we start with a very easy question, and that is just to tell the audience, where do you call home? Where do you live?
I live right outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, and it is so pretty here. I moved to this area to work for the University of Virginia. Now I am self-employed, but we can, as we drive in, we can actually see the Shenandoah Mountains where the Blue Ridge Parkway is from our road. It's really pretty.
No, it's so nice. And it's a beautiful area, definitely. So we had in the bio a lot of your accolades of where you are, what you've done, what you do today. But I always think that it's important for people to understand where you came from. Tell us a little bit about what your journey was like that brought you to where you are today.
Well, Vicki, I was one of those kids that was kind of born a leader and was born into a community that didn't appreciate that. From being called the strong-willed child to being told in different religious functions where I met my husband in seminary. I almost have a master's of divinity, and being told, little lady, you don't know what you're talking about. And also watching my mother navigate those things was very interesting. My parents were missionaries overseas, so I grew up in Korea, which when I say grew up internationally, I grew up in Seoul, Korea, and it gave a flavor to my life that most people don't have. Being able to go to school with kids from 65 different countries gave me a global understanding of how culture works and how the world works. But at the same time, it was a little bit scary. There were some things growing up in the 70s and 80s in Korea that were hard. And being able to learn how to navigate those things. As I look back, we talked about resilience. As I look back, those things have taught me resilience. Losing my mother to breast cancer has taught me resilience. Being told at 38 that I had a 13% chance of a live birth from an IVF fertility specialist, and turning to my husband and saying, well, adoption is 100%, it's like always looking for the next step, because if you think of life as a bunch of roadblocks and hurdles, then you can't get over them. But if you are willing to say, you know what, there's always another option. And so I think that's just the story of my life, is there's always another option. Even when I might dissolve into a puddle on the floor and say, how is this possible? It feels like the world is ending. And I've done that at many points in my life. But being able to go to sleep and wake up the next morning and say, okay, what are my options? And I always ask what if, and I always ask what's next, because I can't imagine sitting still. And having lost my mother, I don't want to end my life and say, did I do it all? Right. She knew she had, I don't know, we had her 15 years, 13 years. But it changed her perspective on how much I do life, how well I live life. And watching her battle cancer and be fierce and strong about it, and just put her foot down about certain things, finally, after many years, really just kind of gave me a perspective of, I don't want to wait till it's a dire situation for me to do those things. I want to do them now. And having an adopted son, I want him to see, it doesn't matter which background is. We don't know half his background, right? It doesn't matter whether you're a woman or a man. It doesn't matter any of that. It's, you were created as unique to do specific things. And if you don't fulfill that, who will?
That's exactly
So
right.
that's kind of where I landed, where I am.
Awesome. Such a good story. Whenever you talk about being that your adoptive son not knowing what their background is, and I think that's so important, and it really stresses how important as parents it is for us to instill upon those young minds that we were blessed with, one way or another, our core values. So talk to us a little bit about what core values are.
Well, I actually I have digital course, and I teach workshops and such about core values. And it's a big topic right now. I mean, if you just do a Google search, you're going to find hit after hit after hit after hit. So I think being careful about how we are talking about it with a specific description and a specific definition is important. I love working with people with their business values, the core values of a business. This is what we work towards.
Correct.
I love working with people in figuring out what the values are that they have that they want to live out in their lives. But core values are the principles and priorities that guide your own actions. They're the foundational convictions that allow you to navigate all the ups and downs and the complex situations while still keeping your identity and your authority front and center. And what that means is these are the things that you're born with. These are not things that are outside of you. These are not, I just did a workshop last week, and one gentleman says, yeah, because we walk through and we talk about them. And he says, yeah, I know you said family's not a core value, but it is. it's my core value. And I said, well, of course, I told you I was going to push back. Right. So in doing that, I said, well, it sounds like what you're talking about to me is belonging or devotion or community. And so helping people dig deeper underneath the things that are outside, because in this culture, especially in leadership, we are taught to do, 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 do. We are taught, put the system in place, learn this thing. You talked about my accolades. And I walk through a lot of myths that people have about what's going to get them ahead. And one of them is getting that MBA, getting that PhD, getting that certification. And what does that get you? A really heavy resume.
Mm-hmm.
It might get you the next job, but it also might not. It may be the path for you, but it also might not get you the fulfillment you're looking for. And so I ask people to go on that personal journey and step way back, like all the way back, and say, well, what is it that I am wired to truly care about? What are my non-negotiables?
Yeah.
So that's my definition of core values. And they show up as a lot of times they are intangible, but you can see the results of them.
Mm-hmm.
I have a client whose top core value is respect. And so when you disrespect this person, you will hear about it almost instantaneously. And so part of it is learning how to handle what happens when handle situations where your core values are what I call dishonored or stepped on or undermined, right? Because I don't think people want to do that for us. I think everybody wants to honor who we are individually, but if we don't really know and we're only reacting to somebody stepping on a tripwire for us, then we're not communicating them well to other people. So they're not just in kind of intangible, but they're also reciprocal. They're not, like I said, with my client whose respect is her top one, it's not that she just demands respect from other people. That's narcissism. What she wants is, I will give you respect, and in return, I expect it. And the best relationships are built on that mutual respect for her. Now, that, of course, is a principle that we can apply to everyone, but for her, it's really, really strong. Another aspect of core values is that you're wired with them. So every decision, every reaction, every, I don't know, everything that you've ever done in your life has either been affected by, influenced by, or as a result of a core value. You may not think that, but even the person you maybe spend the rest of your life with has something to do with your core values. They see you in a way that you may not see yourself. They also, and I've been talking about some negative pieces, they're what really bring you joy. And so I tell people there's two ways to kind of get a start on looking at what your core values are. Is number one, what really angers you, like today and yesterday and the day before, like every day, this is a thing. Or in a work situation, that person, or that when somebody does this thing. But the other side of that, the flip side of that, is what truly brings you joy, right? If reading a book that stimulates your mind and makes you think about the way the world could be, or all the options that you might have, is this something that brings you joy, it could be that touches on a core value. So that is how I talk about core values. It's very internal, but when you understand them, it's very easy to kind of build a house on them so that people know where you live, and so that people know what your front door is and when it's locked. And that's how it's like, it gives you the opportunity to create these really simple boundaries that people recognize because they see you for who you are.
Yeah. And oftentimes I really think that people that get stuck with decision making in business and life, it often, if you just go back to your core values,
yes,
does it align with my core values? It makes the decision so easy. You're to say no when it's a no, and trust
and when
that.
I work with people, I tell them this is how you implement your core values. You use them as a filter because they give you your internal authority. They give you the conviction you need because now you know what you're really passionate about. And they give you the confidence to say, hang on, am I staying within my own guidelines? Have I veered off the road that I said I'm walking on?
Right.
And so really, there's a confidence that comes with using them as people sometimes will use the word filter. They'll use them as a filter, or they'll, my son loved bowling when he was young. And so we did a bunch of birthday parties there, but we always put up those bumper guards or the gutter guards. Let me put the gutter guards, so that the ball wouldn't go in the gutter. So depending on what works for you, being able to say, okay, I want to live with authority, I want to lead with conviction, and I want to have the confidence that will give people the courage to follow or to be with me in leadership, then that's how I'm going to do that, is I'm going to operate from these core values.
Yeah. And, that's what I teach too, is that it's really the courage that builds that confidence. It's and you do, whenever you have that conviction that this is what I believe, and I don't care what you believe, but this is important to me, you will be able to have that passion that people are always looking for, and that confidence and that air about you that people don't understand sometimes. Why is it when that person walks into the room, they just have that air of confidence? And it's really because they know who they are and what their core values are all about.
Yeah, I call that charisma.
Yes.
And charisma doesn't come from a way we act. It comes from how well we live who we are. It's our own authenticity. And that's when I say, this is how you get magnetic leadership.
Yeah.
It's like drawing the negative side, or the negative way of saying it is like moth to a flame. It's like the Pied Piper. People just want to follow because they can see that you are as true as possible to yourself.
Bees to honey.
Bees to honey. I like that one.
Much more positive. So what is the big deal about DISC? The DISC has been around for a long time. I can't tell how many times I've done it. And, each time is a new revelation as you evolve and grow. So talk to us about what is the big deal.
Well, like I said, I grew up overseas. I grew up walking down the halls with kids from 65 different countries, which means there were probably about
different cultures,
anywhere from 18 to 30 languages. And being able to understand how people are speaking and understand what they're saying. So what we did there was an English speaking school. So everybody learned the language of English. But it was always appreciated when we learned another language. I learned a few words in French. I learned a few words in Spanish, and it was just always, and German, it was always interesting to do that, and it made them feel welcome. And then when we were living in the community, the Koreans were always honored and shocked when we could speak Korean. It's a very difficult language to learn, and for English speaking people. And even now, my dad will, if we walk into any place where there's Koreans, it's like we always just bust into Korean because it makes them feel, we want them to feel welcome, even though we might be in their establishment, So that's how I describe DISC. That's why it's a big deal. DISC is a method that helps us understand what language other people are speaking. And it's a language of wiring that you have in your head and the way you communicate. So it's a pattern of communication. And so when I work with people, I talk about your core values tells you who you are. Your DISC tells you how you communicate and how to actually connect with others. And that is that second step that means if I walk into a room and I'm speaking English and everyone else in there speaks Spanish, I'm not going to get anywhere. But if I notice, oh, wait, everybody in this room speaks Spanish, I'm going to go, hola, right? And so that's kind of what I do with DISC. So it is if you haven't done it before, the assessment is super simple. I can't tell you how many clients will email me and say, I just took the assessment, but I thought it was the practice part. Because it's only about a 10-minute process, and it's so accurate. And it's divided, the results are divided into the 4 quadrants, which is the acronym DISC. And so it stands, the D, starting at the top left of the quadrant, is the driver or the dominant. And these are only about 3% of the people. They're your bottom line people. You need these people on your team so that you can get stuff done. Seriously. The next one around the clock is the I, or the influencer. I am a very high I. We are the ones that love being around people, and we're talkative and we don't mind being on stage, but we're also the ones that are very enthusiastic. So it's called the influencer. Only about 11% of the population. Going back further around the clock, the bottom left is your steadies. These are the backbones of your organizations. These are the people that keep the trains running on time. They love the status quo. If you need a manager, you want an S. Right. That was part of my story, is that I ended up in a management position and I am not a manager. I was always looking for ways to fix the process. Yeah, we just made that process better last week, Andrea. I know, but can we make it even better? And I wasn't interested in managing the status quo. I was constantly instigating change. But people who, when you have really good, loyal team members, this is about 69% of your population, and they're the ones that make your teams run. And so the chances of you walking into a room and having, out of 10 people, 6 of them are S's, is very high. And then finishing it off, the C is your creatives or your compliance. And these are the detail people. They're usually very quiet. They're task oriented. They are very detail oriented. They will ask you every question that they can think of to get every answer, because their desire is to get it right. These people make fabulous musicians, fabulous accountants, fabulous, anybody that needs to detail work, that's who it is. My husband and my son are both high C's, and my son's detail comes out in Lego and design, whereas my husband's, it all comes out in research. So it's very interesting to watch how that comes out. But knowing that they are of a C communication mindset means that I might have to ask my husband to do something, and he will ask me every question. And I have to remember, he's not grilling me. He doesn't not trust me. He just wants to make sure he gives the right answer. So I think the big deal about DISC is you can know yourself, but if you don't know how to communicate with other people, you're missing a step.
Yeah. It's a huge, huge piece. And it often is in conflict resolution. It comes up because people rush to the solution or react without taking time to think about, how am I communicating this request, or did I set the expectations clearly? Did I even give expectations? And now I'm all over you, and you have no idea why. So yeah.
Well, and you make a good point there when you said, did I communicate this well? Did I set these expectations? Because that's one of the things that when I work with my clients, I remind them the responsibility of making sure that the listener receives what the speaker wants to actually have them receive is on the speaker. It is my responsibility to make sure that you understand what I am trying to say. It's not your responsibility. It's great when we have the back and forth. When you ask questions, that's wonderful. But the true responsibility lies with the person who is trying to share the information.
Yeah. And I think as a speaker, that's where a lot of times, as you're coaching people, you find that they talk about I and they relate it to them. And to really reach your audience and engage, you have to speak in a way that they see them, that the story is theirs. And that means you don't use the word I, it's you and they and them.
And we.
And we, yes. We is a great one because of that community aspect that we talked about earlier. So we talked in the beginning about intentional optimism. So explain to the audience where you came up with that idea, and why is it really very important that we think about it as we're moving along?
So I shared a little while ago that my mother passed away. She died in 2017, and I was 50. And I have been doing personal growth work, Vicki, since I was 20. And always seeking. I started with Franklin Covey system. And
me too.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And if I always forget to pull it out. Oh, no, I actually have it right here. I'm going to show it to you. These were my governing values. And you can see the page it's like paper, and it's covered with tape, right? Packing tape. It's my own personal lamination machine. And these were my governing values when I first went through Stephen Covey's work. And the very top one at that time was freedom. And I didn't, I mean, and there were things like friendship and health and beauty and honesty. And so some of those are what I would call core values today. But it was the very beginnings of me learning how to live out who I was in a way that was both efficient and productive and was good for others. But when my mother died, I really kind of had a crisis of identity. And I think this is common. I had an 8-year-old son. And, so it was like, I was older. It's not unusual for a 50-year-old woman to lose their mother, but for a 50-year-old woman to lose their mother and have an 8-year-old son, I was like kind of caught in this weird space.
Yeah.
And as part of my grieving process, I just said, I really need to know what I believe and why I believe it. What makes me tick. And so not only had I been doing all this work, but I really dove deep into it. And I kind of came out of like this crucible experience doing brainstorming and putting down all these words and categorizing them. And this is where my C shows up for a disc.
Yeah,
Anybody? I'm
the
an
mind
ICD.
mapping.
Yeah, I did all this mind mapping and I realized I had about 6 categories that I said, this is for sure. I want to live out at least these 6 categories. And I was looking for a name for them. And my mother, the old bit way back before Florence Littauer, the disc thing was called, I don't remember exactly what it's called, but it was it was like the choleric and the sanguine and the phlegmatic. You know what I'm talking about? This is
I did. The only thing I know is disc. So.
Okay, well, this was pre-disc. This is kind of what disc is built on. My mother was the I, she was the sanguine. And so I kind of wanted to call it sanguine, becoming sanguine. And my friend was like, nobody in the world knows what that means anymore. And and so I said, all right, well, I guess the word that people use for me all the time is intentional. And I am intentionally walking away from feeling realistic and depressed. I'm intentionally walking into an optimistic world. So as I developed these and taught them over the course of about 3 or 4 years, that's where I landed on. These are attitudes and mindsets that we embody and employ to live out our goals and dreams with excellence. And even now I say to live out my core values with excellence. So that's where they came from. And I'll give them to you really quickly. If you go to my website, you can probably find a free download that gives like a PDF of them all. But the first one is optimistic. It's almost like their bookend. I call them tenets because tenets are the things that we live, right? So the first one is optimistic, and it includes being hopeful about tomorrow. It includes being confident or positive that I can actually do what I need to do. And it also includes being proactive. I'm not going to sit around and say, I'm hoping. I'm going to do something about it. The second one is present. And I think this is also a buzzword as well, but it includes having a sense of wonder and not even a childlike wonder, but an adult size wonder. Like, I know what happened to that crocus in the ground over the winter, and I'm still surprised that it came up, but being present also means that I'm generous. I also share of myself and that I'm kind and open. The third is energetic. This is where industrious comes in. It's like, I want to make a mark. I want to do something. I want to live with joy and excitement. And I want to be life focused because other people are important to me. Number 4 is courageous, which is where leadership comes in. It's like, I'm going to lead and, somebody's got to go first. And in almost every group program, if they say, who wants to go first? I'll look around, and if they don't raise their hand in like 1 second, it's like, I'll go first. It's like somebody's got to go. And then it just opens the door for other people to do it. But I also, and I think I saw this in your, somewhere on your site, this whole idea of adventure, being willing to see life as an adventure. And, before GPS, my husband and I would get lost using maps because neither one of us are good at it. Say, well, I guess we're on another adventure. But that reframes some of the hard work that we do, some of the work that we take or that we do in the steps that we take that we can't necessarily see where this is leading, but we know it's the right thing to do. And if you're able to reframe it as an adventure, then it builds your resilience.
Exactly.
It gives you that. Yeah. The 5th is wise. That includes being willing to understand, like, this is the straight from Covey. It's like, seek first to understand and then be understood. Being wise with my words, being careful with my words, making sure that they are uplifting to other people and building them up, and to myself. And this is where self-talk really comes in. And then there's that respect piece, giving it and taking it, making sure that we model that for everybody coming after us and those that interact. And then the final one wraps it all up as intentional. And this is having that sense of purpose. I think we try to make purpose too nebulous and nuanced and big and difficult. And it's like, my purpose today could be a little bit different than my purpose tomorrow. And eventually I'll figure out what my big purpose is. But because of that, I need to have a plan. I want to have, even if it's a loose plan, I need to have a plan, but I also intend to grow every single day, because once we hit, we go through high school and we go through college if we do that, or we go through grad school if we do that. And that's like this plan of growth. And then we hit the world and we don't ever make a plan to grow. So these are the things that I tell people. You start with your core values, you learn how to communicate them, and this is how you live it out. So it's a full circle thing of then coming back and saying, well, I live out my core values. What are they again? Right. So it's, that's kind of the cycle of what I teach.
Very true. And, I think living the life with the sense of adventure gives you permission to, you talk about excellence, but excellence doesn't always mean perfection.
No.
And I think
Agreed.
that's where people get that confused. And when you go on an adventure, you don't know what's coming your way. You don't know what's going to happen, and how you react to it goes back to that optimism of being able, okay, well, there was this change in direction. Where can I find the good in that? And I think that makes you be able to not be as fearful. So then that brings that courage and that confidence of, I'm okay with whatever comes my way.
Yeah, they all work together. And if you just Google what is intentional optimism, it should show up. The little free download of what is intentional optimism should show up.
So when we talk about decision making, and I think this is really important as we talk about teams too, and having the ability for that critical thinking. So what in your mind constitutes critical thinking?
My top core value is freedom of thought.
Yeah.
And I used to think, because even on my governing values, they had a numbered 1 to 10. My biggest one is freedom. And I used to think that was bigger, that, it's like, I don't have a job and nobody tells me what to do, but I've learned that I'm okay with rules. I don't mind rules. Just do not, under any circumstances, tell me what to think. And we're going to say something. Do you feel that as well?
No, I agree. Like, yeah.
And I do not tell you how to think.
Exactly.
Right. But that is an example of how that is really my core value. And it would show up in little things like my precious mom would buy something for her house, not my style at all. And she would say, "Isn't this pretty?" And I was flummoxed. I didn't even know how to answer, because if I said yes, I would be lying, which goes against all of my authenticity beliefs and my core value of authenticity. But if I said no, then I'm like maybe hurting my mom's feelings or telling her that her stuff isn't pretty. It was just this terrible catch-22. And my husband, when I finally figured out these things for myself, my husband used to say, because he's a C and an S and he loves to be inclusive, he would start a conversation. Wouldn't you agree that whatever? And I would just finally I said, okay, we have to start sentences differently. Can you say it differently? And so I started thinking about it. Said, what do you think about this? And then we could have a great conversation.
Right.
I grew up in, like I said, my parents were overseas. My parents were missionaries. So I grew up in a conservative evangelical community. I met my husband at seminary. I'm still a pastor's wife. But there is a lot of, not just in that community, it's just stronger in that community. In our Western thought, and even in Korea, it's like there's a specific way that society is telling you you're supposed to think, and you're supposed to take this information and do X, Y, Z with it, and then you will get this result. And that's how you, in America, get your, white house or yellow house with a white picket fence and the 2.3 children or whatever. And we have systematized so many things. We have systematized and programmatized, whatever, I'm making up words. We've done that to the point that we just take things at face value. There's a certain amount of that that's not terrible, but when it comes to things like that really matter on social issues and religious issues or political issues, or even just how to lead and how to show up, women in corporate, a lot of times still, we step all over each other rather than linking arms and moving up together. And we've gotten now to the place where women are really standing up tall, but it's almost in this response like to like put men down, and like, well, that's actually not the answer. So learning how to think critically is learning to be able to take in information and say, all right, what do I assume about this? What do I believe about this? And what have I been conditioned to think about this? When you're willing to run it through these, I call them their ABCs, then you can say, do I really believe that? Or is this something that I was conditioned to believe? And we are conditioned to believe those myths I talked about earlier, like you have to have an MBA to make it in the business world, or even just certifications. Even as an entrepreneur, I have to have these certifications to be a really good coach. Some people are really good coaches without certifications, and some people really need them. But there's assumptions and conditioning that we have that we don't even see. And if we're not willing to take that kind of thought by the horns and actually look at it and say, I'm going to run you through my own little filter here. And sometimes that's your core values. And sometimes it's just, where did you come from? Little thought. There have been times I've gone through some religious deconstruction that kind of helped me see that my faith was really strong, but what I needed to get rid of was the way I did it. It was the way I did it. And I think we do that in leadership too. I think we can be a really good leader and realize, but the way I'm doing this is somebody else's strategy.
Yeah, right.
And so I even shared with my dad, I said, yeah, I had this weird belief that, this, whatever it was. And he looked at me and go, where did you get that? I'm like, well, I thought I got it from you. And what happened was he was my authority figure when I was younger. And so anytime I had something that would come up that was like a conditioned thought about certain things, I just assumed that it came from my dad, and it didn't. A lot of times we don't realize it. So critical thinking is being willing to stop long enough to reflect on what we're thinking or feeling and saying, where did that come from? And that is a learned behavior. We are not taught to do that. My son is a freshman in high school. He is not being taught to do that. We're taught to regurgitate information. And so reclaiming our own ability to say, and it may be that we may land in the same place, Vicki, right? It's like, okay, that answer, I'm cool with that answer. I may have gotten there from this direction when you got there from this direction, but we landed in the same place. That's cool, but now you know what you believe and why you believe it. So critical thinking is a little more tied to your beliefs, I think.
Yeah. And, that's exactly why I work with the youth in teaching them how to be confident speakers, because I think so often they do in school, they're taught to just regurgitate everything. And then whenever they do have a creative or innovative thought, they are fearful of saying it because of the reaction they might have, as opposed to being able to find their voice and being tying it to their core values and their understanding and knowing this is what I believe and this is why I believe it, and being able to communicate that clearly and concisely.
That's good.
And so then when they're 30, hopefully, and they're in business world, they'll be much more effective as a leader.
Yeah. And I love that that's what you do. I'm trying to live that out of my home with my 15-year-old. And, as a parent, I want him to do what I tell him to do. But as a parent, I also want him to think for himself, because I want him to be able to think for himself when somebody comes at him with drugs, when somebody asks him to do something that is not healthy, when he makes decisions in a car. So I think it's really important for us to definitely foster that in the younger generations.
So time is flying by. We're going to have to definitely have another session for sure.
Okay.
But what is next for you?
Well, I am in the middle right now of pivoting just a little bit out of full-time coaching into more workshops and more group work, which is very fulfilling for me. As a speaker, trainer, coach, I did want to develop all those coaching skills, and they, excuse me, they've really paved the way and paid off. But my sweet spot is in not necessarily keynote speaking, but in like facilitating, I call that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm
Mm-hmm.
running mastermind groups. Right now, I'm running a couple of free ones and leading into some paid mastermind groups. Of course, I'm a Maxwell certified speaker trainer coach, so I have access to all of Maxwell's stuff.
Yeah.
And doing my core values. I have some really great new clients working on those kinds of things, and it just kind of blows people's minds when you say, "I know this is what you think it is, but we're going to go a little deeper on that." So my work is moving from less one-on-one to more group, which actually opens it up to a lot more people, which is really exciting.
Yeah. I prefer groups too. I love to facilitate. Awesome. It is time now for me to share my slide that has contact information. If you have enjoyed hearing what has been discussed today, I hope that you will take advantage of doing a screenshot. If you're just listening, you should have had a paper and pencil, taken notes, but go grab that paper and pencil now if you have not. The website is theintentionaloptimist.com. Again, theintentionaloptimist.com. On Facebook, you can find her by her name, Andrea.m.Johnson.180. LinkedIn is Andrea-Johnson-the-intentional-optimist. Instagram is The Intentional Optimist. TikTok is at Intentional Optimist. And YouTube is at Intentional Optimist. I'm going to turn it over to Andrea to tell you what her call to action is for today.
Yeah, I'm excited to share that I have a free download for you, and it is theintentionaloptimist.com/, really easy, lead with leadership confidence. And that way you can get an idea of what it's like to work through the process of discovering and uncovering your core values, because they're in there. They're not something that you have to go look for. They're inside you. And if that's not enough, I then also have a digital course that you can work through that kind of takes you a little bit deeper. It's designed to work out for about 30 days. And if some people need even more, if you need the back and forth, like Vicki and I were talking about, sometimes having that really is helpful. I do have a hybrid coaching program, and you can just contact me regarding that. The best place to contact me, because she read out all these different social media spots for me, I respond to DMs on LinkedIn and Instagram every day. It is the best place to find me, either LinkedIn or Instagram. And I would love to have you subscribe to my YouTube channel. I also have a podcast that we didn't mention here. It's called Stand Tall and Own It. And for 3 years, I interviewed female leaders that were unique and different in order to find their stories and help other women or even men find their story in some of these stories that these women were telling. And so I've changed, just this last September, I changed the name of it to Stand Tall and Own It, because I learned so much from them and realized I still had some growth to do, and I needed to stand tall and own my own message. You talk about finding your own voice. So I switched from sharing other people's messages to really sharing my own. So that is available where all podcasts are available, anywhere you listen, and on YouTube. So that's what my YouTube channel is, mostly my podcast.
Awesome. So Andrea, it's been just wonderful. You and I are so aligned. It's wonderful to chat with you and to hear what you're doing, and hopefully be able to support you in all of the things that you have. It's just so important, I think. And the pandemic, again, I think brought gifts for people to have them start to really have time to reflect on the value that they have and maybe what their lives need to maybe journey to.
Yeah.
So thanks
Yeah,
for being.
reflection is so important. It's experience is a great teacher, but it's not a good teacher.
Yeah.
Reflection, evaluated experience is a fabulous teacher.
Yeah.
So being willing to take the time and do that is so important.
And thanks for taking me on that journey back to Franklin Covey days. It's so interesting. I was not going to, I had decided in high school, because of my family just really couldn't afford college, that I had to do my own development. And so Franklin Covey was one of the first paths that I took to begin that journey of self-development, and has helped me throughout many, many years. but
it's a great place to start.
that was a great place to start.
Yeah, you
All
can
right.
still see my little 6-hole
I
punches
know,
and
I know.
everything.
I probably have a box somewhere that has my binder.
It's hard to get rid of them.
And I think I did get rid of my tapes. I cut my
Oh,
cassette tapes that I had.
yeah.
Awesome. Well, as always, I remind everyone that life is a journey and it's up to you to enjoy the ride. This is Vicki Noethling signing off.
Thank you for tuning into the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast with Vicki Noethling, where we share impactful lessons that help you grow as an individual, grow your confidence, and find the positive and good within you so you powerfully and authentically become the best version of yourself. Remember to visit our website at www.findyourleadershipconfidence.com and enjoy even more great episodes like this one. Again, while you're here, subscribe to us via your favorite network. We look forward to seeing you next time on the Find Your Leadership Confidence podcast.